Today we have Dr. Hager Kechine, whose keynote address is on the effective webinar use on students' performance. Dr. Kechine is an associate professor in the Management Information Systems Department of the Faculty of Administrative Sciences at Laval University. She has an MBA in Information Technology Management and a PhD in Management Information Systems. Her research interests mainly relates to the study of acceptance and the effective use of information technologies by individuals in the field of e-health and e-learning. So welcome and thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very, very happy to be with you today because I'm tired of shoveling snow of my parking, so you can guess where do I come from. Quebec. So today I will talk about the use of webinar by students and what is the effect of this use on their performance. And to do that, I will talk you about my history. It's not so long, with the use of information and communication technology in e-learning. So before talking about my history, I have to talk about the context of the study. I belong to a business school, which is called Administrative Science Faculty in Laval University. And we are known in this business school as tech-savvy. We are known in the Laval University as the ones that use a lot technology. And in the early 2000s, we began using technology with the internet. So students that are in class courses come to the course and they have access to online forums. And in the early 2000s, it was like wow for them. In the middle of 2000, we decided in the Management Information System Department to transform all our in-class courses to online courses, the undergraduate and the MBA courses. Why did we do that? Because we have to meet students' needs. Most MBA students were working, so they don't have the time to come to the university. So we were treated as crazy in the faculty because we used a lot of technologies. And we began using the WebCity system. I think that you know WebCity for online courses. And the university decided to develop its home system, which is called ENA. In French is Environnement Numérique d'Apprentissage. In 2005, the chief of the Department of Management Information System Department decided to use podcasts. And at that time, there were not a lot of technologies of podcasting. So he made a homemade podcast. There were a lot of technological problems, but we were able to record our sessions. And why did he do that? But because he thought that teachers or professors have to make a show to students. So some students, for their learning, have to see or listen to this show. So he convinced us to use this podcast. Few years later, the faculty or the business school found it as a good idea. So the university has brought the Illuminate system, a webinar system, and many teachers of the business school were using the Illuminate system. And now we are converting or transferring our use to Adobe Connect, and we are trying different technologies. So this is the context, and from this context we try to collect a lot of data to make empirical research. This is the team. This is Daniel Passeau, which was the chief of the department. This is my colleague, Sausan Lacal, which is an assessment advisor at the faculty. And our travel together began in 2007. Our travel in studying the use of information and communication technologies in online courses. We began in 2007, and we tried to evaluate the effectiveness of an educational environment incorporating podcasts. This was our objective, to try to see is the use of the podcast by students is efficient or not. So our research question was, do listening to podcasts and not listening to them produce different results in regard to cognitive and affective variables? So made the comparison between students that used the podcast and students that did not use the podcast. And so it was a quantitative research, and we had two categories of variables that we called cognitive variables and affective variables. We have had a lot of questions from the paper reviewers saying, why did you call them affective and cognitive? Cognitive variables are related to learning, and affective variables are related to feeling. So we tried to answer this question, and we used this model which we borrowed from a PhD thesis of one student of our business school. So in our model, we tried to assess the effect of listening or not listening to podcasts on these cognitive variables, which are learning effectiveness and performance, and affective variables, which are satisfaction, anxiety, participation, autonomy, and motivation. Our results, so we made a comparison between the two groups, and the first result that we can see is that in 2007, the number of students who listened to podcasts is lesser than those who did not listen to podcasts. So in 2007, there were not a lot of students that were willing to listen to podcasts. But we tried to make our analysis with this sample, and what we found is that those who use the podcast have a better learning effectiveness, and those who use the podcast are more satisfied with the course, with the teacher, with the content. However, final marks, we were not able to find convincing results about the performance, so the final marks. And this was explained by the fact that we were unlucky, because at that time teachers were on strike. So students lost 5 weeks. And at the end of the semester was delayed, and at the end of the semester we asked students if they want to pass the exam or they want to have the mark P as pass. So you can guess what did they choose, most of them. And in this sample, we consider all the students that come to class. So, in this sample, non-listener, 152 students are made of students that they come on class and students that they follow the course online, completely online. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt that. To be clear, so the control group didn't listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
The experimental group did. Were the control experimental groups identical except for the addition of the podcast to the experimental group, or were there different?
It's the same group in the same class, but they have the choice to listen or not listen to
So
podcasts.
it wasn't a supplemental?
No, it's the same course. And it's important to be the same course because we have to assess the learning effectiveness. And the learning effectiveness, we asked a question about the course, about the teacher. So we had to have the same teacher too. In 2008, I went on a maternity leave for my second child. So as you see, men say always to their wives to take care of the baby when they cry. So I spent 2008 changing diapers, and when we change diapers, we don't have really empirical results.
At least you have diapers. There is no diapers in Venezuela.
No. Yes. In 2009, I came back to the same data, and I tried to make the same analysis to see if there is a difference between those who use the podcast and those who didn't use the podcast. And that time, I eliminated the students that came to class. So I compared those that listened to podcasts, to the recording, with those that did not listen to podcasts but did not come to class, because the course was an online course. So they use the material of the course online and they don't listen or they don't come to listen to the teacher. And the results here are a little bit different because participation, autonomy, and motivation are better for those who use podcasts. Once time, final marks, we didn't have convincing results because teachers were on strike. In 2010, we used the same sample of students, but we asked them different questions, and that time there were qualitative questions where we asked them what are the advantages and disadvantages to listen to podcasts. So our objective was to identify factors that motivate and demotivate students to listen to podcasts in the context of online university courses. So we are in the context of online courses. We obtained 108 answers, online answers, so we weren't able to make deep interviews. Also from fall 2007 from an MIS course. The result that we obtained is that students see also that there are cognitive advantages to using podcasts, but there are essentially spatial and temporal advantages from using the podcast. So our conclusion was that students are looking for practical aspects from using podcasts more than cognitive aspects from using podcasts. Another interesting finding is that one of the students saw it as a technological advantage, the use of a new technology. But remember, it was in 2007. So maybe if you do again this study today, it will not give the same results. For the disadvantages of podcasts, there are many disadvantages, notably the technological factor, because it was a homemade system, so we have a lot of technical problems. But what it was important for students is the absence of social and personal interaction. In 2007, in online courses, students were looking for social interaction. They were a little bit disappointed by the lack of social interaction, because when we presented them the technology of podcast, Students thought that they will speak to the teacher with this podcast on live. They did not think that there were only records, so they were a little bit disappointed. That's why it's an important disadvantage of using the podcasts. Another break. Another maternity leave one once again, and we are still wondering why there are more men in this conference than women. So it's one explanation of that. Now what are we doing? We are examining psychological factors which could influence acceptance of the webinar technology by undergraduate business students. So we are focusing on the acceptance of technology by students. So the research question was, what are the variables that may influence the intention of students to use Illuminate? Illuminate was our webinar system. And why are we interested in the acceptance of the technology? There are two reasons. The first reason is that the use of this technology was not compulsory. So the students, as for podcasts, have the choice to use or not the technology. And as we saw it, few people used podcasts. So we tried with webinars, with Illuminate, to see why do they use, what are the factors that make them willing to use webinar or not. The second reason why we are interested in the technology acceptance is because in the management information system field, the technology acceptance is important, because when users don't accept the technology, it leads to its failure. So it's important for us to see, before investing more and more money in these technologies, to see if students are willing to use webinars or not. So once again, I like quantitative research. We used this time the UTOT model, the Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology, which is very well known in management information systems field. It's an integrative model that was derived from previous models of users' acceptance, which are very used in the management information systems. So those who are from this field can recognize the UTOT and the TAM model. Data collection was made on winter 2012, and we tried to test this model. These are the main variables that we retained from the UTOT model. So we tried to see if performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, and facilitating conditions may have an influence on the behavioral intention to use Illuminate, which is our webinar system. Our results. Well, our results. What we found is that performance expectancy has an influence on the use of webinar. This means that when students expect to better perform in their courses, they are willing to use the webinar. And what do we mean by better perform? We mean that students will make their homework easier and faster, in a faster manner, in an easier manner. And when students think that they will have better marks when using this webinar system, they will use them. Another interesting result is that social influence has an effect on the willingness of students to use webinar. So what we mean by social influence is others' opinion, family, friends, colleagues, and we know that the image is important in business school. They have to look good. So they were looking for this image. And when we think that important people around them think that they have to use the webinar, so they will use them. Facilitating conditions too have an effect on the use of webinar. When students think that they will have the technological and organizational support, they will use the webinar. But for effort expectancy, there is no relationship between effort expectancy and the use of webinar. Maybe the effort to use the technology was not really a matter because the students were young, so they are accustomed with using the technology. And here we assessed the model with 116 students whose learning was based on Illuminate. So they used almost only Illuminate. We assessed the same model, but this time with 176 students who used Illuminate from 0 to 18 times, regardless to class attendance. So we included in this sample students that went to classroom. And the results are a little bit different because here facilitating conditions did not influence the use of webinar. Because students that go to the classroom go to the faculty, and in the faculty we know that we have a technical staff and the organizational support to use technology. But the effort expectancy here influences the use of webinar. People that go to classroom, maybe they are not very accustomed to using many technologies. So for them, effort expectancy is important. When they think that they will make less effort to use webinar, they will use webinar. In 2030, we assessed the same model, but we added autonomy here as a variable. And we tried to assess the direct link between autonomy and behavioral intention to use webinars, and the indirect link through performance expectancy and effort expectancy. The results have shown that there is no direct effect between autonomy and behavioral intention to use webinar. However, the students that think that they are autonomous think that will better perform, and this performance will have an influence on their behavioral intention to use webinars. We assessed that on 177 students regardless to class attendance. Our future, what we are making now, we are continuing in the evaluation of information and communication technologies. There is no baby here. We stop with babies. So our objective is to assess the effect of the use of Illuminate on students' performance. And this time we are really interested to see if the use of Illuminate has any direct effect on their marks or their grades. We did a quantitative research, and we used the data that we collected in 2012, and 167 respondents answered the questionnaire. So our model was the following: is the use of Illuminate influencing students' performance, so their marks or their grades? And we tried to assess also the moderating effect of age, gender, concentration, autonomy, and anxiety. What we mean by concentration here is it's that in a business school there are two kinds of concentrations. There are thing-oriented majors and object-oriented, person-oriented and thing-oriented major. Person-oriented majors are management information system, marketing, and management. Think-oriented majors are operational research, accounting, and finance. And we wanted to see if there is it a moderating, it has a moderating effect. Our results were a little bit astonishing because what we found is that there is a direct effect between the use of Illuminate and the marks of the students. But this effect is negative. So students who use the Illuminate have worse marks. But when moderated with anxiety, this effect is positive. We assessed that on 167 students. Until now, we don't have an explanation to these results because these are our preliminary results, and we have another sample made of 450 students, and we will try to reassess the same model with this new sample with data collected in 2030 to see if is it true that the use of Illuminate make people have bad results. And these are our findings about the use of information and communication technologies in e-learning. Thank you.